It was a lovely winter day in the Grand Canyon. Young Joanna only had to walk for 128 kilometers more to set a record. But instead of the girl's victorious laugh, her friend heard a short scream and a muffled thud. Joanna had fallen off a cliff. She fell from a height of 100 meters and became one of the 900 victims of the Grand Canyon. But few tragedies in the area have explanations as clear-cut and natural as this. The Grand Canyon is situated in the state of Arizona, the United States. A significant part of its tourism area is in the eponymous national park. The ravine carved by the Colorado River stretches across 446 kilometers and has a depth of almost 1,900 meters and a width of 29 kilometers. This is a giant and breathtakingly beautiful natural formation. But, at the same time, the Grand Canyon is a deadly dangerous place. But not all reasons behind tragedies are as obvious as they may seem. So what can cause deaths in the Grand Canyon? From the mid-19th century to 2022, over 900 deaths have been recorded. Every year, the figure grows by 12 on average. Most of these deaths could have been averted, but there's something about the Grand Canyon that inspires people to do stupid things. In 2015, a 38-year-old man decided to prank his daughter by pretending to fall into the abyss. He was going to jump onto a ledge a few meters lower, but he flew more than 120 meters and died. That year, 54 more people fell into the ravine. Among them were 38 men, and all of them either jumped from cliff to cliff or posed for photographs. But they were lucky enough to survive. As of today, around 200 people have lost their lives in a fall in the Grand Canyon. One of them was 24-year-old Joanna Hosaeda. The girl was so in love with the place that she held her wedding ceremony in a spot with a canyon view, and later, the couple invited the guests on a 40-kilometer hike. Joanna was an experienced tourist and had studied the canyon for years, often with her husband and their friend. In February of 2012, Joanna went on a hike through the ravine. The woman was well equipped and prepared. She had planned to walk the Grand Canyon through, becoming the youngest of 15 people who have managed to do this at all. Hosaeda had walked for 1,368 kilometers when her friend heard the thunder of falling stones and a scream. He found the girl's lifeless body at the bottom of the ravine. Joanna had fallen from a height of 90 meters. At that point, she only had to walk 129 kilometers to set a new record. Still, the odds of falling to one's death in the Grand Canyon do not exceed 1 to 1.8 million visitors. There are countless other ways of dying in this place. Among them are dying in a flood, drowning in the Colorado River, losing your life to a heat stroke, or freezing to death. There's also a likelihood of dying after getting hit by lightning. They happen in the national park area approximately 25,000 times a year. Even more exotic stories can happen. For example, getting water poisoning. There are cases when tourists drink a lot of water but eat very little during their Grand Canyon tours. They died in a few days, seemingly for no apparent reason. It was because drinking water copiously and perspiring causes a drop in the level of sodium in your blood. When this indicator falls to a critically low point, the person dies. Traffic accidents, suicides, and murders also happen in the Grand Canyon, but most deaths have occurred, contrary to expectations, due to an air crash. Around 380 people died high above the ravine. The scariest such event happened in 1956. That day, 2 propeller planes collided over the Grand Canyon. Every single person out of 128 passengers and crew members from both aircraft. Of course, these deaths can't be blamed on the canyon, but what if its staggering size and frightening stories can alter the human consciousness? Tourists tell stories of their friends seeming to lose track of reality while contemplating the Grand Canyon's views. They sat over the cliff, silently looking into the distance. And when they tried to get up, they'd be disoriented and fall into the abyss. There are far scarier stories the canyon can tell. One of them happened a long time ago, in 1928. A married couple, Glenn and Bessie Hyde, decided to run the rapids of the Colorado River. They say Bessie wanted to become the first woman to canoe for the whole length of the canyon. But as the couple were setting off, she was in low spirits. The Hydes traveled by the river for over 965 kilometers. But after this, the couple suddenly vanished. They were last seen alive on November 18th. In a few weeks, their boat was found intact with food supplies, clothes, and all their gear, just 74 kilometers away from the mouth of the Grand Canyon. a large-scale search yielded no results. The couple were gone without a trace. Glenn and Bessie's story quickly became a local legend, and just a year after the mysterious disappearance, a group of tourists who followed the couple's footsteps told scary stories about Glenn and Bessie around the fire. On their way, these tourists met Georgie Clark, who traveled down the river solo. The woman accepted the tourist's invitation to join them. Georgie claimed to have been living in the canyon for a few years already, subsisting on the fish she caught in the river, and now she wanted to go back to normal life. The woman seemed to just be a little odd, until one day, she made a shocking claim. In reality, she was Bessie Hyde, and she killed her husband to start a new life. The tourist didn't understand if she was telling the truth or just trying to scare them by the fireside. Nevertheless, Georgie Clark became famous as the rafting queen of the Grand Canyon. She was the first woman to hold commercial tours down the Colorado River. Before her appearance, only exclusive trips on comfortable boats were on offer. Clark made river tourism a mass activity, depriving it of its elite status as her tours were 3 times cheaper. Clark always experimented, was stubborn and eccentric, and society deemed her strange. So, after the woman's death in 1992, the police decided to search her home. There, they found a birth certificate for the name Bessie DeRoss, and a marriage license proving the union of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. And there was a pistol in her lingerie drawer. But for the police, these clues were not enough to claim Georgie Clark really was the missing Bessie Hyde. Some say that the eccentric rafting queen could have set the scene up on purpose before her death. Apart from that, the two women arguably did not even look similar. But even if Georgie wasn't Bessie, what made her spread such rumors about herself? This could be the Grand Canyon's influence, because it has other chilling stories under its belt. For example, the tragedy of Robert and Donna Spangler. In 1992, they came to the Grand Canyon for the weekend. During a hike, Donna slipped and fell from a 60-meter tall rock. Her husband reported the event to the police as an accident, but Donna's parents did not believe the accident theory. They weren't too fond of Robert, but had a logical argument too. Their daughter had a fear of heights and would most likely never approach the edge of the canyon. The police in Arizona had no reason to launch an investigation, but they still kept an eye on Robert for some time. They found out about the man's past, and chilling suspicions came creeping into their minds. As it turned out, 20 years before, Spangler's first wife and their 2 teenage children were shot to death right in their home. The late wife was ruled to be guilty of the tragedy. After this, Robert married for the second time. His partner was his lover, but eventually, the pair divorced. All of this had happened in another state, so Arizona State Police had no access to the case. The situation changed only in 7 years. When the prosecutors paid heed to the suspicious events in Robert Spangler's life, he was diagnosed with brain and lung cancer in the terminal stages. The police assumed that the man might tell them his darkest secrets under such conditions. That was exactly what happened. During interrogation, Spangler admitted having pushed his third wife, Donna, off a cliff in the Grand Canyon. He had been unhappy in the marriage, and, in his own words, he didn't know any other way of solving this problem. Along with that, the man confessed to having killed his first wife and 2 children. The reason for this, you may have guessed, was his lover. She got lucky enough to become Robert Spangler's only wife, who managed to leave him alive. The man was sentenced to life in prison, but died of cancer soon afterward. Undoubtedly, the Grand Canyon is not the only place where tragedies happen, but the locals believe there are cursed spots and even gates to the underworld in the area. The indigenous inhabitants, the Hopi people, believe that the ravine has a portal into the underworld, where the first people came from. This place is called Sipapu, and it looks like a red hill with a hole in the center. The Hopi warned tourists to refrain from looking at Sipapu when passing it by. Reportedly, helicopter pilots refuse to look down when they fly over the place. After all, the biggest air crash in Grand Canyon's history happened nearby. Since then, it's also adopted the nickname Crash Canyon, and one of America's scariest hike trails. They say there have been multiple sightings of ghosts of the deceased, and strange voices have been heard there. But even though there is no irrefutable evidence, it's impossible to deny there's a pattern of people disappearing without a trace in the Grand Canyon. In 2001, 13-year-old Justin Richardson decided to have fun with his 3 older friends. They escaped from unwanted attention to the Kaibab National Forest, which overlaps with a part of the Grand Canyon. It's unclear if their party was so great or if the opposite was the case, but at some point, the boys split and lost each other. Justin came to a native town called Tusayan and asked the locals to help him find his missing friends. The people of Tucson were surprised when they were later consecutively visited by 3 other missing boys Justin had been looking for. Each of them asked the locals for help finding their friends lost in the forest. Eventually, 3 of the lost kids were found, but none of them ever saw Justin again. Only in 2 days, the boys' parents reported a missing person to the police. They lived in different cities, and Justin would take turns visiting his mom and dad. So time was necessary for his family to realize the boy was nowhere to be found. Justin had repeatedly run away from home, so at first, the police considered this option the most feasible. The boy knew his surroundings well. He knew the many nearby roads, power lines, railway tracks, and other landmarks. He could probably have found his way home, even if he was lost. But this didn't happen. 13 years after Justin Richardson's disappearance, he ceased to be considered a runaway. No trace of the missing boy was ever found. It could be due to frightening stories like this that people believe in the curse of the Grand Canyon. National Park rangers regularly receive letters from tourists who have visited the ravine and have taken something as a souvenir. People send these objects back, asking to put them where they belong since they seem cursed. Such souvenirs from the canyon have supposedly brought problems and tragedies into their lives. It's officially forbidden to take any object of natural origin home with you. The reason is to protect the environment and the canyon itself. But this kind of coincidence causes word of mouth, and the examples we've given are far from the most mystical ones. In 2015, the canyon took 21-year-old Drake Kramer from San Antonio. He was last seen near a hotel on the south rim of the national park. As a coincidence, this place is less than even 11 kilometers from the town of Tucson, where Justin disappeared. Drake was studying geology at the University of Texas and had a rich outdoor experience. He had already visited the Grand Canyon a few times too. A few days before the guy's disappearance, he was seen in good spirits at a local cinema. That same day, he wrote his father he was going to the canyon to return to Mother Earth and free his soul. Drake's parents took his words to mean a desire to be in nature, which the man greatly loved. The next morning, Drake left his car near his hotel cabin and wasn't seen ever since. Rangers with dogs and rescue team members on helicopters spent 6 days searching the area, but no traces of Drake Kramer were found. He's still considered missing. Even if Drake did want to remain in the canyon forever, this doesn't answer the question of the whereabouts of his body. But it's not just people who disappear in the Grand Canyon. A whole billion years of Earth's history disappeared there. The thing is, scientists can easily find the age of rocks and fossils. They still haven't managed to find out the Grand Canyon's age. Some believe it to be only 5 or 6 million years old, and others think its age to be 70 million. The chaos happened because an entire layer of rock was missing across the ravine's area. You don't need a geology degree to notice that rocks in the canyon seem to be made up of different layers. If you take a closer look, the edge between them becomes even more apparent. But look at the fact that the lower part of the rock seems to be positioned vertically, and the upper part has pronounced horizontal layers. And here's the enigma. The age of the lower layer is from 1.4 to 1.8 billion years, while the upper layer is just 520 million years old. This phenomenon bears the name of Great Unconformity. So across the entire Grand Canyon, there's a layer of rock that was supposed to have formed over a billion years. No wonder people go missing. But some of the disappearances do look quite mystical. Take the story of 22-year-old Morgan Heimer, for example. He was an experienced tourist and a great swimmer, so he started work as a guide at a rafting company. He led tourist groups across the Grand Canyon and along the Colorado River. At the end of May 2015, Heimer went on his usual 8-day tour around Grand Canyon's west rim. On day 6, the group stopped by a calmer part of the river near Pumpkin Springs to swim. While everyone was swimming, Heimer stayed on the bank, ensuring safety and answering the tourists' questions. At some point, when someone wanted to ask Morgan another question, he was nowhere to be found. It was at 4 p.m. on July 2nd. Heimer's colleague thought he had gone on a break, but when he didn't return before dinner, it became clear Morgan had gone missing. Search and rescue teams examined the river downstream as well as the nearby area. Heimer's colleagues and group participants were all interrogated, but to no avail. Morgan Heimer was gone in the blink of an eye, and no one ever saw him again. They say his shoes floating on the water were the only evidence he was in the canyon that day. The rangers supposed he could have drowned, but he was an excellent swimmer. Sooner or later, the body would be found in the water. The theory of him going for a walk and getting lost looks even less likely. The thing is that Heimer knew the area very well, and even more than that, he would never leave his group behind. Nevertheless, there still are many undiscovered areas in the Grand Canyon. According to scientists, there may be up to 1,000 caves in the ravine. Despite this, only a little over 300 of them have been discovered, and only a few of them have been explored. Currently, tourists can access only one underground cave complex in the Grand Canyon, Cave of the Domes. But how come now, with all the modern technology, scientists don't explore at least the discovered caves of the Grand Canyon? This might somehow be connected to the Forbidden Zone on the national park's territory, but we'll discuss that later, and for now, let's return to the west rim of the Grand Canyon. Around 50 kilometers from the place of Morgan Heimer's disappearance by the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, another man went missing the following year. A former NASA employee, Floyd Roberts, was an experienced tourist and visited the Grand Canyon repeatedly. In the summer of 2016, he, his best friend Ned, and his daughter went on another usual hike through the valley. On their way, they happened upon a large hill and split paths. Ned and his daughter decided to climb it, and Floyd wanted to go around it. They agreed to meet on the other side of the obstacle. The first two had to rest on the top of the hill for a little while because they got tired. When they finally made it to the meeting spot, Floyd was nowhere to be found. Ned thought his friend could also have taken a break to catch a breath, but the man did not appear, and the father and daughter went to search for him. For the next few days, helicopters and on-the-ground teams with dogs were looking for the man within a 10-square-mile radius. The only thing they managed to find were footprints, but no one could prove they belonged to Floyd Roberts. And although the Grand Canyon is undoubtedly a dangerous place, even here, such disappearances are strange. These cases might be connected with the Grand Canyon's most bizarre mystery. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette newspaper stated that a giant cave complex that could accommodate 50,000 people has been discovered in the ravine, and quite unexpectedly, countless ancient Egyptian artifacts were found there. There has never been any proof of this story except for a few strange facts. As it turns out, the names of many landmarks in the area of the Grand Canyon have to do with Egypt. We don't know for sure where they came from, but this area of the Grand Canyon is off limits, and, strangely enough, it's situated in the vicinity of the Bright Angel Trail, infamous for the disappearance of Justin Richardson, Drake Kramer, and other tourists. Even park employees and scientists cannot go there. Explorers are also not allowed into the local caves, supposedly for their preservation, and flights are prohibited over a large area of the Grand Canyon for the renewal of the natural quiet and protection of the locals. Flying drones is also not allowed. These prohibitions in the Grand Canyon ignite interest in the local myths and rumors. But be it as it may, the Grand Canyon takes human lives regularly. And the more people enter its territory, the more risk of not making it out alive. So, are there really mysteries hidden in the Grand Canyon? Leave your comments, subscribe to the channel, and just in case, don't take souvenirs from cursed places.